Thank you very much. Deputy Presiding Officer, to ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day.
First Minister.
Well, the rest of the day, I expect, like many people in this chamber, I'll be reading the Leveson report with great interest.
Thank you very much. Joanne Lamont.
Indeed, I look forward to reading it myself. Lord Leveson, as you have said, will publish his report into the regulation of the press within the next hour and a half. After the excesses of phone hacking, including that of Millie Dowler, there has to be change. But as we try to restore the public's confidence in the press, we need also to protect press freedom. And we need to know that those who will implement the Leveson recommendations will do so in the interest of the whole nation and not just themselves. In that context, can I ask the First Minister, when did he last personally complain to a newspaper about its coverage?
First Minister.
I'll check the record and see if I can help Joanne Lamont in these remarks. But on the substance of the Leveson report, which is a hugely important matter, as Joanne Lamont will realise, we can't preempt the recommendations of a report we haven't yet seen. However, we can assume the report will take a serious and considered view of the regulation of the press and other related matters which are devolved to Scotland, such as criminal prosecution, defamation, the functions of the police service. Now, I've made it clear that personally I don't favour state regulation of the press, but a strengthened press council which will have the support of the print media industry and, more importantly, the confidence of the wider public, who have been rightly angered at recent episodes concerning phone hacking, blagging, potential illegal activity. Such a system needs to ensure redress for people with no great resources, and also a link to statute is possible, as in the model pursued in Ireland. However, it's entirely possible that Lord Leveson may propose a more thoroughgoing statutory underpinning of regulation. Therefore, it's important that we in this Parliament have a proper process for considering how we take the Leveson report forward in a Scottish context. So I'd like to set out a proposed process that this Parliament may wish to follow. First, as I've already indicated, members of this Parliament will rightly have the opportunity to debate the Leveson report in further detail next week. Secondly, I'll invite all of the other political parties in this Parliament to meet with me to seek their views on the report. I believe it's important to achieve cross-party agreement in Scotland on the best way forward. Finally, and if agreed to, I propose the establishment of an independent implementation group chaired by a current or recent Court of Session judge with 5 non-politician members. The purpose of this group would be to consider how best to implement the Leveson proposals in the context of Scots law and the devolved responsibilities of this Parliament. This will allow the process and any proposed changes to go through the normal parliamentary procedures in this place.
Thank you. Joanne Lamont.
Well, there's a great deal in that, and I wonder whether it might have been more beneficial that post-Leveson reporting we did a full statement from the First Minister in that regard. But I also note that he didn't answer my question, because there is a big issue here about politicians and press owners having an unhealthily close relationship. And I have no doubt that the First Minister will be able to give us a list of examples of various people in my party and others who have attended events hosted by the Murdochs. We know that that was an unhealthily close relationship, but we also know the First Minister is the only leader of a mainstream political party to host Rupert Murdoch since the stomach-turning revelations that one of his newspapers hacked Millie Dowler's phone. Does he understand that his relationship with Murdoch undermines any confidence we can have in him to set up a regulatory system for a free press?
First Minister.
Well, I was hoping that Joanne Lamont would kind of rise to the occasion of the issues which are before us. You know, we now know the frequency of meetings between various political leaders. We could debate this in terms of Gordon Brown's 17 meetings when he was Prime Minister with Rupert Murdoch over a period of 3 years, against my 5 over a period of 5 years. We could talk about the going in the back door of Downing Street as opposed to releasing a press statement immediately after the meeting. We could do all of that. But isn't it rather better that we kind of address the big issue facing the country and facing the Parliament? And that's if we can find a process in this Parliament, which looks incidentally unlikely at Westminster at the present moment, because my understanding is that the Prime Minister and then the Deputy Prime Minister are going to make conflicting statements in response to Leveson. But is it possible, might it be possible in this place, in this Parliament, given all that's happened and given our responsibilities, to actually find a way forward? Now, Joanne Lamont said there's a lot in what I said, and I welcome that. But, at least can we have kind of a response in terms of all-party talks, in terms of finding a process of taking forward the recommendations of Leveson and looking at them in a Scottish context, so we might actually find a solution. And just, because of the importance of this issue, and in deference to the victims of illegal and potentially illegal activities, might we just kind of rise to the occasion and point a way forward?
Well, perhaps in deference to the victims of all those horrific activities and in deference and an attempt to rise to the occasion, the First Minister might have apologised for meeting with Murdoch, the only mainstream politician to do so after these revelations came to a head. Because, of course, the First Minister says we don't want to preempt Leveson, and then precisely does exactly that by saying he wants Scotland to have a separate Scottish regulatory system with a separate Scottish Ombudsman. Considering he would be ultimately responsible for their appointment, and given his track record, can he understand why the rest of us might fear that he sees Leveson as a chance for him to exercise control over the Scottish press on an unprecedented scale?
First Minister.
Well, let's see what Lord Leveson has got to say on these matters. But can I just point out that one of the reasons I referred to the Irish system is the ministers in the Irish government do not appoint the Ombudsman. And I thought some elementary checking of the system that I was alluding to, and the system which I certainly felt had some currency in the evidence to the Leveson report. Some elementary checking perhaps would have reassured Joanne Lamont on that matter. But, what I've done and tried to do in the statement is invited not just Joanne Lamont, but the other party leaders in this chamber into a discussion about this to see if we can find a way forward. One other thing I want to say, and this is kind of important in terms of reassuring people in Scotland, in terms of the victims, that the first occasion that the police and prosecution authorities of Scotland had the information about Scottish victims is when they requested it of the Metropolitan Police in July of last year. The Metropolitan Police had held that information since 2006 at least. And on doing that, Strathclyde Police immediately informed the potential victims of phone hacking and set up Operation Rubicon. And since that was set up, there's been 3 people, as has been well publicised, who have been detained on allegations of perjury or attempted to pervert the course of justice. There's been another 4 people who have been questioned in relation to breaches of data protection. These are responsibilities of the Scottish Police and Prosecution Authorities, but I think it should be reassuring to know for this place that as soon as the authorities in Scotland had the information which pointed to abuses on Scottish citizens, they took action. And, I don't think, on that basis, that we should have any doubt about the firmness of intent to uphold the criminal law in Scotland.
Thank you. Final question, Joanne Lamont.
I think I would be keen to urge the First Minister to recognise in any regulatory system coming forward that he's not implying that somehow the problems in Scotland are different from the rest of the United Kingdom and that there cannot be a United Kingdom-wide solution to that, because he alludes to the Irish system. What we need to do is have a rigorous scrutiny of what that and any other option might be. Because, as he knows, and we agree on this, the whole Leveson process has been an attempt not just to regulate the press better, but also to restore the public's faith in the press, severely dented after the horrors the Dowley family, the family of the Hillsborough victims and countless others went through. And I'm sure we can both agree that this cannot be a debate with politicians talking about our relationship with the press, but an understanding of the deep anger and concern felt by ordinary citizens right across the United Kingdom. It is important that we get this right, not just for this Parliament, but for Parliaments to come. And when the First Minister invites us to all-party talks, can I ask him to commit himself, first of all, to building a consensus throughout the country on how we regulate the press, and that when we hold all-party talks, he agrees to be bound by the conclusions of those talks?
First Minister.
I wouldn't be inviting Joanne Lamont and the other party leaders to all-party talks unless I wanted and saw the importance of getting a consensus on this issue. And what are the terms of what requires to be done? Well, first and foremost, and the reason for mentioning the position of the police and the prosecution authorities, the law must be upheld, and people must have confidence that criminal law will be upheld. And I don't think we have any reason on what I've said to criticise the lack of action on the prosecution authorities and the police of Scotland as soon as they had the information to act upon. Secondly, freedom of the press is hugely important within that context of law, as is behaviour of the press. Thirdly, there has to be the ability of individuals, or groups for that matter, with no resources to have redress if they are wronged by the press. That's why the idea of an ombudsman is a significant and attractive idea. In terms of what we do, the key thing, surely, that's come out of the controversy from all parties is the publication and transparency of meetings with editors and newspaper proprietors. That is something which is good. And lastly, we have to point to a solution. You know, we have to get above who did what to whom when and point to a solution to give redress to the victims of malpractice and illegality. And that's why I do hope that all parties in this chamber will rise to that occasion and will try to build that all-party agreement. I can't promise all-party agreement since I'm not certain that agreement exists. But if there's goodwill on all sides, then surely this Parliament can devise a particularly Scottish suggestion and solution which meets our responsibilities, which include the prosecution authorities, the civil law of defamation, the criminal law of contempt of court, and press regulation. These are devolved responsibilities to this Parliament. There are other things which are not devolved, such as the broadcasting, such as the internet, such as the protection of information. But these are our responsibilities, and for goodness sake, let's rise to the occasion, try to meet the circumstances and find a solution for the Scottish people.
Thank you very much. Question 2, Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I say that I welcome the First Minister's offer to meet him and with other party leaders once we've all had the opportunity to read and digest Lord Levison's report, and I look forward to taking this forward at the earliest opportunity. And may I ask the First Minister when he will next meet the Secretary of State for Scotland?
First Minister.
No plans near future.
Ruth Davidson.
Thank you. This week's official NHS figures confirm what we in this chamber already knew, that there are 2,000 fewer nurses across Scotland now than there were when this man came to power. But can the First Minister tell us, in order to cover for all the posts he's cut, how much the Scottish Government has been spending on agency and bank nurses?
I'll get the precise figures and get them sent to Ruth Davidson, but I know that there's been a reduction in spending in these areas. And I also know, and Ruth Davidson, because we had the staff figures, will want to acknowledge, as others in this chamber have not acknowledged, that there's been an increase in staff in the National Health Service since this party took office. And I know she'll also want to do two other things. Acknowledge the defence of real-term spending and revenue spending for the health boards across Scotland as part of this government's programme. And finally, she will, I'm sure, want to congratulate all workers in the National Health Service, ancillary, nurses, doctors, consultants, in terms of the extraordinary performance that we saw in the Health Service annual report, and the magnificent response in terms of waiting times, the reduction of hospital-acquired infections. We can be extremely proud of our National Health Service, and that should be something else that's shared across this Parliament.
Thank you. Ruth Davidson.
Thank you. I thought I heard the First Minister say that there had been a reduction in these figures. In fact, we spent £94.5 million on agency and bank nursing this year. That's up £4 million from last year, or about 8 Ryder Cup visits. That's over 160,000 extra agency and bank nursing hours this year alone from last year, at a cost far in excess of their staff equivalent. I see the former Health Secretary whispering to the First Minister there. He moved you in order to fight his referendum for him. Perhaps you might want to speak to his current Health Secretary. This is at a time when nursing vacancies in Scotland are at a 3-year high. There are currently 1,400 posts lying empty in hospitals and health centres across this country for nurses. So can I ask the First Minister, why are nursing vacancies at a 3-year high? Why is this government seemingly unable to recruit nurses? And why is it spending over the odds on bank and agency staff, diverting valuable resources away from improving frontline priority care? This is more NHS failings from a government that seems rapidly to be losing its grip.
First Minister.
Two things. She shouldn't mix up agency and bank nurses. It's good that the NHS have an available bank of nurses to meet patient demand. That is actually a good thing, and she shouldn't confuse the two things. Can I just reiterate two things to Ruth Davidson? Firstly, I think in the face of the extraordinary pressures from in spending in terms of dictated by her colleagues in Westminster, the fact that we have over 4,000 more people working in the National Health Service in Scotland than when we took office some 5 years ago is a very, very substantial achievement indeed. But even more of an achievement, did Ruth Davidson actually look at the annual report of Scotland's National Health Service? Doesn't she think it's a fantastic achievement to achieve the progress in waiting times, to achieve the progress in cancer detection, to achieve the progress on reducing hospital-acquired infection? And does she have any scintilla of confidence, given what's being said by virtually every independent commentator about the destruction of the National Health Service south of the border? The other thing we'll unite behind, as well as support for our National Health Service, is that we'll actually have a National Health Service which serves the people of Scotland.
Thank you. We now move to constituency question from Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister is aware of the situation faced by workers at the Employ factory in Springburn in my constituency, who have been told this week that they will now be made redundant. He may also be aware of the flawed process pursued by Employ and overseen by the DWP, which we will no doubt discuss and debate this afternoon. But can I ask him whether, even at this late date, his government might consider adopting a support scheme for workers similar to that available in Wales, or indeed of taking in-house this manufacturer of NHS wheelchairs at a time when the waiting times for NHS wheelchairs are still far too long?
First Minister.
Can I say that, as the member knows, Fergus Ewing has been extremely active on this issue and extremely sympathetic to the plight of the Remploy workers. I fully support what she said about the processes being followed and fully support the calls that have been made for an investigation. The debate, which I believe is taking place later today, it will give a further opportunity for the Chamber to explore a range of ideas about how this Chamber and this Parliament can help these workers in their extremity. And I look forward to that debate, and I'm sure Fergus Ewing as Minister will approach it with a very open mind.
Many thanks. Neil Findlay.
In June, the First Minister advised me that the temporary closure of the children's ward at St John's Hospital in Livingston was clearly unsatisfactory, and that steps were being taken to ensure this didn't happen again. Well, guess what, Presiding Officer? Less than 5 months later, the 24/7 status of the ward is again under threat, and there is a genuine fear for its long-term future. Can we get a cast-iron commitment today that he will instruct the Cabinet Secretary for Health to step in if there's a further downgrade?
First Minister.
Well, the Scottish Government and the Cabinet Secretary for Health has already made it clear to NHS Lothian, Fife and Borders, we expect them to fully engage with the public and other stakeholders to ensure children and babies get the best services available across the south east of Scotland region. And the member can be extremely confident that the Health Secretary is extremely active on this matter.
Thank you. Question 3, Willie Rennie.
Deputy President, a fuller statement later today would have been more appropriate on Leveson, but I will engage constructively in what he plans. To ask the First Minister what issues will be discussed at the next meeting of the Cabinet.
First Minister.
Well, the Cabinet will discuss issues of importance to people in Scotland, but can I point out gently as I possibly can to Willie Rennie that the Government asked for the same site of the Leveson report as the UK Government, and that was denied by his own colleagues in combination at Westminster. We asked to see the report yesterday. If we'd seen the report yesterday, we could have given him, as an opposition leader, the same access to the report as the opposition at Westminster are getting, and then I think we could have had a statement this afternoon. I find it very difficult to understand how Willie Rennie actually believes we can have a statement when we're reading the report, and when he, by definition, wouldn't have seen the report at all. So perhaps you should have a word with the Deputy Prime Minister, whose relationships with the Prime Minister may or may not be at one on this matter at the present moment. And certainly I don't know if we could have matched the two statements at Westminster, but if we'd been given proper access to the report, then certainly could have had his statement this afternoon. As it happens, there might well be advantages in having the debate next week, with everybody able to take a proper look at what is a lengthy and, I'm sure, considered report, and they have come to a considered way forward.
Thank you. Willie Rennie.
I was actually trying to be constructive, but hey. on Tuesday, we saw the new Chief Constable and the Police Board Chair sitting side by side but facing opposite directions, in direct conflict on the running of the new police force. Did the First Minister envisage this sort of disarray when he planned this new Scottish police force? Is the problem the people he's put in charge, or his legislation?
First Minister.
I think I would describe as they did themselves, as a creative tension, which we want to see, which will be fully resolved in good time for the establishment of the police service. Can I point out to Willie Rennie, his opposition to the police service of Scotland, the National Police Service, has been well known and well ventilated. But at some point, given, I think, just about everybody else in this chamber recognises the huge benefits that will come from having the National Police Service, that Willie Rennie and his party will have to explain how the savings that will be made and how the more effective policing of the communities and public of Scotland will be affected, how they would have achieved that if they'd stuck to the existing system with all the inherent inefficiencies within it.
Willie Rennie.
I'm glad he can joke about this, because it's barely 100 days since royal assent for this Act, and already the plans are in turmoil, and 6,000 people work for the police service in civilian support roles, everything from scenes of crime to headquarters administration. We know that hundreds of them will have to change jobs, move jobs, or take redundancy. Doesn't the First Minister think that those people deserve to know who's taken the decisions about their future, who they should try to negotiate with? This is his law, it's his people. What's he going to do about it?
First Minister.
I wasn't joking about it to Willie Rennie. I was pointing out that both parties told the committee that they fully expected to resolve any differences in good time to progress. Sections 17 and 21 of the Act are very clear in terms of the Chief Constable's direction and control of the police service, and I fully expect any remaining differences to be ironed out and solved in good time for the effective implementation, as indeed both parties said in front of the committee. In that light, I regard Willie Rennie's description as somewhat overblown, a departure from his normal, calm and reflective way of asking questions.
Question 4, Nigel Donn.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what plans the Scottish Government has to change the structure of local government.
First Minister.
Well, we have no plans to merge local authorities or to change the structure of local government.
Nigel Donn.
I'm delighted to hear that, I may say, and I thank the First Minister for his comments. The Christie Commission, of course, encouraged the Government to look at better integration of services. And can the First Minister confirm that that's the way the Government proposes to continue its reform process?
First Minister.
Yes, I can. And necessary reform of local government doesn't mean necessarily changing boundaries, and I've said what the Government's position in that. It also involves the integration of services, the better coordination, some of the significant changes that are being made to the public services of Scotland. All of these things are being done, and I think that's fully in line, for example, with the calls that have been made by various commissions to find a more effective way forward. So Nigel John is exactly right to point to significant changes that are being made in terms of the coordination of vital services for the people of Scotland.
Thank you. Sarah Boyatt, briefly, please.
Didn't the Cabinet Secretary for Justice let the cat out of the bag on the sustainability of local government services, given the thousands of jobs lost over the last few years and given the Scottish Government's funding regime, which is not delivering sustainable public services in Scotland?
First Minister.
Well, I think Sarah Boyett wants to take a look at local government funding settlement properly and recognise that if, and I don't know what Labour's current position is on this, but if in particular we allow for the real terms increase in the revenue funding of the health service, which presumably they now support, despite not supporting it at the last election, then she'll see the significantly rising share, the percentage of Scottish local government of the rest of available public spending in Scotland. And when they get down to that acknowledgement, then perhaps they'll agree with a number of local government leaders, including most famously the former president of COSLA, a member of the Labour Party who was never ending in pointing out that the settlements which were being arrived at by this government and this finance minister were significantly better than what was faced by local government under previous, less enlightened administrations.
Thank you. Question 5, Jackie Baillie.
To ask the First Minister what lessons the Scottish Government has learned from the serious incidents in the NHS reported in the BBC Scotland. How safe is your hospital investigation?
First Minister.
Well, let me say my sympathies, and I know the sympathies of this chamber, go to the patients and families which have experienced care which fell short of standards which we all expect. At our instruction, Healthcare Improvement Scotland have begun a systematic review of adverse events management across the NHS boards. Once these reviews are completed, they will be outlining a national approach to reporting, measuring and learning from adverse events next year. I can also confirm today that we will be piloting a confidential alert line for National Health Service staff who wish to raise a concern about practices in NHS Scotland. This telephone line will support and enhance existing procedures. We are also continuing to support and accelerate the Scottish Patient Safety Programme, a world leader in delivering a safer care which has helped to reduce the hospital standardised mortality ratio by 11.4% over the last 4.5 years.
Thank you. Jackie Baillie.
Can I thank the First Minister for his response? One of the issues raised by the programme he indeed has touched on was the appalling treatment of staff who report serious incidents, such as was the experience of Robert Wilson, a staff nurse at NHS Ayrshire and Arran. He called for a whistleblowers helpline. We did so in December, in February and in May. I am delighted that the First Minister has now come to the Chamber to announce that there will be one. Can I ask him, why was there the delay? Will he ensure that this whistleblowers helpline is independent of the NHS? And how will we monitor the follow-up from the helpline?
First Minister. Well, first, as I've done before, signify that Rob Wilson is a personal friend of mine. I should put that on the record in anything that's said about him. The helpline will be independent. I'm delighted that Jackie Baillie is delighted that we are taking this initiative. And in terms of the serious matters which I communicated to Jackie Baillie, I know she'll welcome these initiatives. I do hope that Jackie Baillie and others in this chamber will want to see these matters in context. Yes, of course, the protection of people who want to reveal bad practice in the National Health Service must happen. That must be a confident part of a confident National Health Service. And of course, we must drive to reduce adverse incidents in every way we possibly can. But one of the aspects of the programme was looking at international experience, and it is relevant to remember that the highly respected and independent Commonwealth Fund had a survey, an international sample survey, and it is only a sample, of course, called Sicker Adults, which was carried out last year. And what that showed is that Scotland had the lowest number of medical errors compared to all of the other countries in the sample, 3% compared to the rest of the UK at 9%, compared to the United States of America at 20%. So while we, all of us, should drive to, because one adverse incident is one too many, and why we should all drive for perfection, I just think a balance of seeing how our health service is performing, as indicated by what is admittedly a sample survey, but nonetheless from a respected organisation, is something of a corrective to the suggestion, which I know that Jackie Baillie wouldn't make, that somehow our National Health Service is suffering unduly from adverse incidents, all of which we'd like to reduce, if we could, to absolute zero.
Question 6, Maureen Watt.
Thank you. Sir, to ask the First Minister whether the Scottish Government considers that the Scottish economy is over-reliant on the oil industry.
First Minister.
No, I think the oil and gas sector is a major Scottish success story we should all be proud of. The industry supports almost 200,000 jobs in Scotland and, of course, increasingly sells its expertise around the globe. North Sea oil and gas exports contribute £40,000 million to the UK balance of payments. International sales from the supply chain have reached £7.5 billion in 2010-11. And with more than half of North Sea reserves by value still to be extracted, we can have every confidence that the industry will make a major contribution to the Scottish economy for decades to come.
Many thanks. Maureen Watt, briefly.
I thank the First Minister for his response. Sir Ian Wood said in an interview recently that the oil and gas industry still had many years ahead of it, but for the North East to remain as an energy hub of Europe, it is important that we encourage new oil-related industries to locate and stay in the North East. Does the First Minister agree that this Parliament must have the economic levers at its disposal to ensure we encourage investment in our vital industry so Scotland will remain world leaders in this field for many decades to come?
First Minister.
I think it gives us an excellent opportunity as a chamber to pay tribute to Sir Ian Wood, who of course recently retired as chairman of the Aberdeen-based oil services firm, the Wood Group. It's been a fantastic success story, built an exceptional leadership team, talented and committed people. Sir Ian deserves huge credit for the manner in which he's led that company over the last 30 years or so. I heard him on the radio saying two things. One was a call for young people to join the oil and gas industry in a tremendous future. It was a rallying call for entrance to the oil industry, which I think is a significant and welcome thing for him to do. And secondly, he did point out in that same interview, with a rapid calculation of the enormous wealth running into trillions of pounds sterling that remains to be extracted from the waters around Scotland.
Many thanks. And that